Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we turn today's current affairs into clear, exam-ready insights for UPSC. It's June 16, 2026, and today's edition brings two important analysis articles for your upcoming mains exam. First, India's introduction of the Producer Price Index. We will understand how it differs from the WPI and CPI and what it could mean for inflation measurement, policy making, and economic analysis. Second, war, deal, and the new Middle East. We will examine the changing geopolitical landscape of West Asia, the emerging alignments, and their implications for India's strategic interests. We will also bring you a short mains value addition segment from today's current affairs, featuring concise data points, committee recommendations, examples, and case studies that can help you enrich your mains answers and stand out in the examination. And as always, we will conclude the discussion with focused prelim pointers for your next prelims examination. So let's begin. So guys, yesterday the government of India silently brought in the biggest statistical transformation in Indian economic history. How? Because recently India is trying to change how we measure inflation, most importantly at the wholesale and at the producers level. So this is exactly how we are going to understand this article deeply from the perspective of prelims and especially mains, because in the PYQs, when it comes to mains, in the past they asked as to how in 2015 we changed the GDP methodology. Also recently they have asked in mains as to how we measure unemployment in the country. So right now 2026 mains can have a potential question as to what were the recent changes related to inflation measurement in the country, and that is exactly where this article comes up. If you look at this PIB article, which has been submitted by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, two major events happened. Firstly, the old ruler is dying. Old ruler means the WPI. Because the government in this notification it has told that within the next 5 years the WPI will be phased out, and also in this new WPI series there have been 7 new changes. Now secondly, perhaps the most important event is the introduction of the Producers Price Index. If you can even read this article here, the Office of the Economic Advisor DPIIT is revising the entire way as to how India actually measures inflation. So this means inflation is nothing but a persistent rise in general price levels of various goods and commodities that we generally use in the country on a day-to-day basis or on essential basis or on a regular basis in a particular region or a country. So when we talk about inflation, it is nothing but the persistent rise in price levels of the various goods and the services. So for example, when we talk about measurement of prices, all of us know that it is a very, very important thing, because inflation, firstly, we have to understand, is a huge problem in the country, because when we see the prices of the goods and services which rise too much, it obviously hits our pockets, hits our wallets. But on the other hand, there is another problem also, because how we measure inflation, how we go to the markets and see the prices as the government is one more challenge, because the RBI, who all of us know, does the monetary policy. And all of us know that in India, the RBI has a target of how much? 4 plus minus 2%. That means that inflation in India should be within the range of 2 to 6%, right? This means that RBI has a target of actually maintaining inflation at stable levels. On the other hand, the government of India is also doing various things indirectly. For example, we all know that the government of India does something known as fiscal policy. So fiscal policy means that how much the government is spending and earning. Based on that also, inflation can be affected. So this is why we have to understand whether the prices are rising or falling, how they are hitting the producers, wholesalers, consumers, by what rate, and various other things. For example, if the price rise is coming from a particular reason or a particular commodity or a particular region, for example, due to the Middle East crisis. So this is exactly how inflation must be measured and why inflation measurement is so important, right? And based on that, all of us know that in India, without wasting any time by explaining these things which have been covered before also, I will try to recap. For example, in India, we have two measures of inflation as of we know. For example, the wholesale price index, which measures inflation at the wholesale markets, such as the mandis and the various wholesale outlets that we see throughout the country. So what the government does, various officials from the Office of the Economic Advisor under the Ministry of Commerce, they go to those mandis. For example, they will ask for the various items. Right now, the basket or the items have been increased from the before. For example, right now, 957 items are calculated. So what the Government of India officials will do, they will go all to these markets and they will look into these primary items, fuel and power and manufactured products, and they will try to understand what are the various amounts of inflation and the price rise that are happening for those items, right? On the other hand, we also have the Consumers Price Index, which is measured not by the Ministry of Commerce, but by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, where we are also including services, because services is not included in the WPI. This is a very, very important concept, which was also asked in the PYQs of prelims. So, recently WPI was updated, in which we have the food and beverages, which has a weightage of around 36.75%, right? We also have various services related to transportation, healthcare, and so on. So the main difference between the wholesale and the consumers, we all know, is that the wholesale inflation is the inflation or the rise in price levels that we see at the wholesale markets. CPI is at the consumers level. Now, we are going to talk about the WPI side here, because this is what has been changed as of now. But before going to the changes, firstly let us understand what was actually the problem with the previous WPI, with the old WPI. Firstly, the old WPI was based on 2011-12 base year. Now we all know that base year is a concept that we use to compare the prices. For example, in 2011, if there was a steel furniture, right, and that costed around 10,000 rupees at the wholesale market, right? Now, the same product won't be priced at 10,000 in 2026, right? So that is how we have to compare how much increase in prices have happened from a particular base year, right? Now, this is well understood. But what happens if the base year is around how many? 15 years before, right? So 15 years old base year does not reflect the current economic condition, because back then we did not, for example, have had solar energy, wind energy, and since then, if you have seen, right now our renewable energy constitutes 283 gigawatts as of March 2026, right? This means that we are actually having more than 50% of our total installed power generation from non-fossil fuels. Now, this was not the scenario in 2011, and that is why back then we did not include the renewable energy in the WPI basket, right? Apart from that, we also have right now increasing pharma exports. We also have the service sector contributing to how much? 55% of our GDP. But it would be very surprising to understand that WPI does not include services. So basically what I'm trying to say is that from 2011-12, we have come a long way. Many things have changed. So that is why change is a new constant. So similarly, in our lives also, we do so many changes as we go on in the future. So similarly, we should also change that. That is why the base year has been changed, right? Second, and perhaps the most important thing, is the issue of tax illusion. Now, what happens, for example, you are a producer of what? Steel furniture. And you buy steel, basic raw materials from various suppliers. The problem is, that whenever producers buy various raw materials, they also pay some taxes, right? And also, when we talk about the wholesale price index, the WPI measurement at the mandi level or at the wholesale market level, now these goods also include some taxes, right? So whenever we include some taxes, we cannot actually know the real price of that good, right? For example, if the Government of India officials, they go to the various mandis and find out that the Almirah right now is costing 20,000 rupees. So how much actually is the real cost of production? We will not know from the final wholesale price, right? Because taxes are here, so many other charges are here. So this is exactly why it creates a tax illusion problem. That means that, for example, if the Government of India increases the taxes, so definitely the WPI will go up, right? And this is why we have to move away from measuring taxes within the inflation parameter. This is what exactly we have done with the PPI, we will see later. But as of now, understand one last problem that the WPI had, that firstly it has an import problem. For example, say when this Middle East crisis happened, right? Our domestic industries were actually performing decently, if not very, very well, but they were performing quite decently, right? But what happened after the crisis? If you see, $3.5 trillion a year is the economic impact that the world saw, right? That is a decline, a negative impact. So definitely some of the impact has come in India, and that is how the impact is coming through crude oil prices, right? We also have the dollar, which is appreciating, or rupee that is depreciating. Apart from that, we also see so many countries rushing to buy petroleum, LNG and various other supplies from other countries. So definitely all of these things have increased the cost of production. All of us can conclude, right, that due to the war, we are increasing the cost of production. And at the end of the day, you have seen that how the prices in the economy are gradually increasing. If you have also seen the last CPI, which also has been covered in the Analyst, right, you have seen how the inflation is almost reaching 3%, 4%, and it is coming in that RBI target region. So this means that we need to change the WPI, and that is exactly what we have done. Firstly, understand basic things, that the basket has been increased. Why? Because there are some new items which are right now relevant in the economy. So 37% new items are included, which reflect the 2026 Indian economy, right? Now, we included what? We included solar energy, wind energy, nuclear under the electricity group. Also, we did what? We shifted the crude oil and natural gas, which was earlier in the primary articles, to fuel and power. So we did not want to have a confusion that, for example, we already know that in the WPI there are three kind of categories. Firstly, the primary articles, which are generally the raw materials which we use in the production. Also, we have fuel and power. And finally, we have manufactured items. Manufactured items is having the highest weightage. Now, for example, earlier, crude oil, natural gas was actually included in the primary items, the primary articles. So we have tried to shift it under a relevant header, right? That is fuel and power. So it makes also sense. Also, most importantly, we are moving towards the new weightage methodology. This means that we are right now calculating the gross value of output instead of net traded value. Just simply understand the net traded value is nothing but the gross value output, which is nothing but the total output, if you can imagine, that a factory produces in 1 year, for example, right? So it is a total value at the factory level, right, which is not including any taxes. Nothing is included here, right? Also, no import, no exports are included here. But what the old method follow is the net traded value, that is the GVO plus imports minus exports, right? Now, the new method is following only GVO. This is a new change, that we are not calculating imports and exports because we are focusing on pure domestic value addition or pure domestic production. As simple as that, right? We are only calculating the domestic value addition. Now, the next big change is the targeted mean imputation. Now, understand this is a very, very simple thing. For example, you are someone who is from the Ministry of Commerce, right? And you are someone who is going to measure the WPI, right? And also you are trying to measure what has been the real inflation in the steel industry, because steel is a primary product, is a primary article which is included in the WPI calculation. So what do? You find out the prices of steel in the month of January, and you find that, okay, for example, that is 100 rupees, for example, per kilo, right? Now, in the next month, when you go and look into the data, you find that no data is available. And this is sometimes which is happening in the country. Sometimes the real prices are not available exactly. Now, the old WPI, what it used to do? It used to fix the January prices for the February prices if the recent month price is not available, right? So obviously this will not make sense because there can be a marginal increase in inflation maybe, or deflation also. So what the government is right now doing, the government will look into the prices of various items that use steel in that. For example, you have steel cans, you have steel machines and so many other things. So for example, if in the month of February the data is not available, so what the official or what you will do, you will look into the various other kind of steel items and you will see what is the inflation in those items. For example, you see that some steel chairs or some steel tables have an inflation of 2% at the wholesale level. So this is the inflation level that you should carry forward. Right? So this means that we are trying to have a better and modern statistical approach, which is also reflected in the next measure, in which we are trying to have a better elementary index computation. It is nothing but a statistical term where we will have less errors, because each and every item, the 957 items and how the prices will be captured will be using highly advanced statistical techniques. And at the end of the day, since we are changing the base year right now, right, we are changing the base year of the WPI right now from the old 2011-12 base year. So what will happen right now is that we will multiply in the new series, right, with the new base year 1.53, because we want to have a link with the last base year. So this is also something which is kind of advanced statistical concept. Just remember that to link the previous base year items with the new base year, we will just multiply with 1.53. Now, why am I discussing all of these things and using this advanced statistical tools? Some of you will tell me that, okay, this is not important, this much detail is not important for UPSC, but you never know. The evolving status and the stature of the mains examination in the past few years have been that they are going to extremely focused topics. For example, remember that GDP question in which they have asked exactly what things have changed in the GDP methodology. Also regarding the employment methodology. So this means that we definitely have to look into the new changes. So finally, let us look into the new arrival, also looking into the new changes within it. So the new arrival here is the producer price index. Producer price index is actually one of the most important tools that most of the major economists and the policymakers were asking for in India for the past several decades, because mainly the advanced countries like US, Germany, Japan, even China use PPI for measurement of inflation actually at the producer's level. Now, let us understand firstly as to why we need the PPI when we have the WPI itself. Firstly, the WPI, if you have seen already, it suffers from various statistical issues. But the most important issue is the issue of tax illusion. Because sometimes taxes, when we add the tax to the final price of the product, we sometimes do not understand what is the real value of production. Now, if there is inflation, for example, inflation happens because sometimes maybe the cost of raw materials increase, or there are some supply chain issues. At the end of the day, inflation happens because the cost of production increases, not due to increase in taxes and whatsoever, right? So actually, if you want to really know what is the real rate of inflation, you will go to the factories and you will ask the factory managers how much you are paying for inputs. From the last month to this month, actually did you see an increase in the price of inputs or not? Or whether you are seeing the increase in the wages of the labor that you are using, and whether that increase in labor wages is finally translating into higher prices, right? So these are the real questions, and these are the real measures, or say the impacts that increase the price of a product in the market, right? Think very, very carefully that the value of a product is actually the most important signal for inflation. If the value or the price increases to manufacture it, then there automatically will be inflation in the market. But since the WPI is including the taxes, import, exports, etc., the price that we see at the wholesale market is sometimes not the real price at the factory level, right? So this is exactly why the government has come up with 2 and 3 major indexes. These 2 indexes are important for any kind of output any kind of product that is being manufactured at the factory. And this is one major change that has happened, where we are trying to include the service sector too when we talk about the producer's price index. So firstly, the input producer price index, this will be released from now on a monthly basis, but as of now it will be based on a trial, right? We will do a trial firstly. Now what will this say? It will say what price does a producer pay when they buy their inputs, very simply. So for example, if you are someone who is producing a smartphone, so what will you look into? What will the PPI look into? It will look into the what type of glass you are using, what type of say various semiconductors, raw materials, and what are their prices. Most importantly, what are their prices, right? So we will look into the purchaser's price, right? And here we will try to look into the inputs only, right? So for example, for a smartphone, the inputs are glasses, semiconductors, and so on, right? So we will look into what is the price that the producer paid plus taxes. Remember guys, this is the input prices we are talking. This is not the final product of that factory. The final product is a smartphone. This will be measured in the output producer's price index, because this is a price which a producer receive when they sell their output, right? So it's the same smartphone company who is selling that smartphone, right, to the wholesalers. This is actually what we mean by the output producer price index, where we do not include any taxes such as GST and so on, right? So indirect taxes are not included at this price, which is known as the basic price. Now you know, basic price was also seen somewhere else, na? Can anyone let me know where that was seen, right? Now if you can see, the sources are mentioned here, where we are trying to get all the formulas and everything. So just look at this. But for prelims, UPSC in 2027 can definitely ask you a question. For example, they can ask you that, for example, if the output producer's price index is greater than the input producer price index, what does that say? That means that the producer is selling at a higher price, hai? If this is the case, that means the producers have a profit margin, which is good for our GDP. The vice versa is not good for the GDP. You all know that. Also, when, for example, this input producer price is greater than the output producer price, it means that maybe we are seeing cost push inflation, which generally means maybe the cost of raw materials such as the glass, silicon, semiconductors are increasing. And this is exactly what we are seeing right now. So this is exactly what can give us a much more clearer picture when we talk about inflation measurement in the country, right? So all of you who agree with me, you can actually let me know that whether this new measure is better than the WPI or not, right? Now, we are also including the services sector. And this is where we are including as of now banking, securities transaction, insurance, pension funds management, telecom, railways, and air passengers, right? Not freight. As of now, we are including this. Why the need for it? Because 55% of the GDP is contributed by the service sector. And if you do not measure what is the inflation for the services, for example, the charges of banking, the charges of insurance, right? So we will never get to understand what is the real rate of inflation. Because as of now, if you can all imagine your lives right now, daily lives, you see that most of us use all the services. So why exclude it from the wholesale or the producer's level? Right? So this is why it has been included as of now. Now this is a very big change, right? If you all can understand that new WPI is having the base year 2022-23. The PPI also will be having the base year of 2022-23. So this is a single comparison table. All of you can pause the screen. Also you can refer to your handout where a single table has been given for your easy revision. Now, if you can also remember the things that we covered in the analyst before, right? If you're revising the analyst quite honestly, you will also remember that we covered some concepts like GDP base year has been changed, CPI base year have been changed, IIP recently have been revised, and these are the two that we are studying right now today. Now I want some responses from you in the comments. In the comments you tell me what is the new GDP base year. Last time it was also done in 2015. Recently also it has been done. So let me know what is the present base year of the GDP, CPI and the IIP. And if you can all see, this is all, even the recent revision, including the all other revision, is a part of the major statistical ecosystem reform that I told in the very beginning, right? Because India will be transitioning to the global standard of measuring PPI. In the next 5 years, PPI will be phased out. So what will happen as of now? As of now, what will happen is the WPI has been revised. So 7 new changes have been done. So for 5 years, with the 7 new changes, the WPI will be calculated. Simultaneously, from now on only, the PPI already has been published, which is a major cause of happiness for most of the economists. Because firstly, the tax illusion will not be there. And that is why exactly all of the world uses PPI and not WPI, which is why India is also trying to discontinue WPI in 2031. Also, imported inflation bias is not there because we are trying to measure what is the pure domestic value addition, which has been recommended even by the IMF for us to follow. Will be very easy for the RBI to follow, because firstly we have to distinguish one thing, that the RBI follows consumer price inflation at the combined level. It does not follow WPI. It as of now does not follow PPI also. Maybe in the future what will happen, we do not know, but maybe what we can actually understand, the RBI will always try to follow the CPI itself because it is the inflation at the final markets for us, right? Now, who all will have to migrate? For example, infrastructure contractors who actually depend on the price revision based on the price change of their raw materials, they will be very happy because right now all the PPI related information will be linked to their contracts. Exporters also will be relieved because of the new inflation levels. Economists and governments will be getting better quality of data than the WPI. So everything is actually pointing towards good when we talk about statistical requirement. Now, when we talk about the real economy, things are not good, guys. Because firstly, if you can look into the fuel and power, 30% inflation in this. Primary articles, 5% inflation almost at the wholesale level, guys. Manufactured products, 7% inflation, 7.5%, right? And all of us know that mainly, if you can see, crude oil, natural gas, mineral oils, these have seen around 50% plus inflation, right? So mainly these are the main reasons why inflation is increasing in the country. Also, if you can see the total inflation, the WPI is 9.68%. Just imagine that as of now, this is at the wholesale level. It is only a matter of time when these wholesale prices will be translated into the consumer level prices. Because if you even see at the food level, which is the basic level, the inflation is at 4.49 at the wholesale level. So this gives a very curious picture to us that recently the CPI was at 3.93%, where we have seen the prices across the various goods and services in the CPI has risen almost to the level of 3 to 4%, right? So on the other hand, the WPI is at 9.68%. Generally what happened, guys, the CPI stays higher than the WPI, right? And it makes sense because from the producer to the wholesale to the consumers, price increases in this direction as we go to the consumers. So it always kind of, it is not the rule, but it always kind of made sense that the CPI is generally higher than the WPI. But what is happening right now? The WPI is higher than the CPI. And this is not something which is miracle that is happening. The same thing also happened during the COVID-19. The similarity between the COVID-19 and the recent crisis that is happening. Similarity is that back then and now also, the government is not letting the prices of various essential things to rise. If you have also seen in other countries such as Indonesia, Middle Eastern countries, all of the petrol pumps and say most of the diesel curbs and various other restrictions are there. And that is why people cannot actually move on with their lives in a normal format. But in India, the government of India is still protecting the consumers by not increasing the price at dramatic levels, by containing the price. But if you can see, it is only a matter of time when the inflation at the CPI will gradually catch up with the WPI inflation. Because even RBI has increased its inflation projection in the 2027 financial year. So this means that we have a divergence of CPI and WPI, which can be a topic of question in your mains exam. So you let me know, guys, whether you agree with this view that WPI will soon catch up with CPI or not. And finally attempt this question. Now we can move on to the next one, where we are going to deeply simplify this lengthy article in the Indian Express Explain page into some concrete steps that we have to understand and remember for our mains exam and also for the prelims exam. So firstly, we have the new information that US and Iran kind of have a memorandum of understanding, right? So I will not be wasting all of your time by explaining you what happened since February 28 when the war broke out. Then you have some silence. There were some ceasefires in between also. There was some silence. Again, in recent times, we have seen how again these two sides are fighting each other. So the chronology and everything, I guess all of you are having good updates because you are reading newspapers, you're watching the Analyst. What I'm going to discuss here is our favorite Mr. Donald Trump's tweet, right? He told that the deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all. I hereby fully authorize the toll-free, just understand, the toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz and simultaneously hereby authorize the immediate approval of the US naval blockade. As if whatever presidential decisions he makes, he always try to deliver directly on say Twitter, because look at the language, he is authorizing, he is fully authorizing, and ships of the world, start your engines, let the oil flow. Just imagine, this is a statement that he has given, and we have to take this statement seriously because Iran also have agreed to this memorandum of understanding. Now throughout this war, if you have seen, these are all the countries which are affected, right? These are the countries which have been targeted by Iranian missiles and drones. If you can see, from Turkey to Azerbaijan to Oman, all of the countries are affected in this region. Also, as you all have known, Iran has been blocking the Strait of Hormuz for months now. And that is where we have this memorandum of understanding right now. Let us look at it firstly. So, the first issue is regarding the nuclear program. So, all of us know, right, that Israel always had some issues with Iran's nuclear program. Israel sees Iran's nuclear program as one existential threat. So Israel always used to persuade US to conduct strikes, negotiations and all those things. So on the nuclear front, also on the other hand, we have seen how the country of Iran have been enriching nuclear weapons secretly outside IAEA safeguards. So all these things culminated in this conflict, and finally in this memorandum of understanding, the first issue is nuclear program that Iran has to address. So Iran as of now has committed not to pursue a nuclear weapon. They will not make any nuclear weapon, they have agreed, right? At least to negotiate and not do any enrichment for the next 30 days, 60 days, which will be the days dedicated for negotiation. Also, Iran always have complained that the US has imposed sanctions on us. We cannot export our goods and services. Our people cannot move freely here and there. We cannot also buy assets abroad. So US told that, okay, we will temporarily waive your sanctions, right? We will also try to unfreeze your assets that US, that we have, for example, have earlier freezed. For example, assets of various business people of Iran, politicians and everything was frozen abroad. Also, the Strait of Hormuz should be opened and the US blockade should be removed. Missiles and proxies which Iran have developed over a period of time, such as Hezbollah and various other. So they have not been included in this memorandum, not included in this deal, which has angered Israel, right? Now, US military presence, right, will be removed according to the US, and it will benefit Iran. right? And ending war on all fronts have been agreed between Iran and US, that for example war that includes Lebanon will not be included, and various other regions, right? So this is exactly how this agreement has started. 60-day negotiation window is there. So if Iran has some issues with the various deals and agreements, they can actually go and try to say negotiate for that. Apart from this, one very important measure is the reconstruction funds. The reconstruction funds also have been promised by the US, because Iran definitely have suffered too much into the war, right? And that is exactly why not only Iran but also various other countries such as India has a huge cost associated with it. Firstly, because we understand we have a 9 million strong diaspora contributing to around 38% of the total remittances that come in India. Now, what is the total value of those remittances? $51.4 billion. For perspective, 56 or 58 billion dollars is a total bilateral India-US trade. Just understand that, right? So definitely, if this entire region is in a conflict, India indirectly is getting less remittances right now. Monetarily, we are bleeding right now. Also, the global oil supply loss per day in barrel is more than the 1970s Arab-Israeli war and the Iranian revolution. Right now, it is, if you can say, more than twice the impact, because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. How will those vessels come in India? So definitely inflation and prices are rising, rupee is depreciating. And finally, India actually promised a lot to Iran by developing the Chabahar port, and Iran also promised that from the Chabahar port we can reach Central Asia, Russia, and even to Europe. So on our economy, remittances, inflation and infrastructural fronts, connectivity fronts, global diplomacy fronts, India is suffering. And that is why our Prime Minister is also holding separate calls with various Middle Eastern countries to mitigate this kind of costs. And this kind of memorandum of understanding can actually be a very good deal going forward. India also supported this because of the many issues that we are facing right now. But this deal has some objections, some oppositions. Firstly, from Israel. Understand this, very important, because these will be your issues for your answers. Now, Israel is telling that Iran's regional influence, for example, say, this is a network of pro-Iranian militant group which are present in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, for example, Yemen also. So Iran, what it did since 1980s to 90s, Iran gradually has developed various proxies. Now, these are the proxies which are located in Lebanon, Syria, and everywhere. They are fighting for Iran against Israel and US. Right? So this network was activated by the Supreme Leader earlier. Right now, the current regime is still supporting them. And whenever Iran is targeted, they also become active. So Israel is telling that nothing was discussed in this agreement as to what would happen to these proxies. What would happen to the regime change that Israel has wanted over the years? That, they wanted a total regime change. Basically, they wanted a regime which is friendly to the US and Israel in Iran, which the earlier Iranian disposition was, right? Also, the lack of nuclear agreement and the 60-day negotiation window is something that Israel sees that again Iran will violate that. Also, for Iran, they are having a very hard line and a very non-compromising aspect. Firstly, they are wary. They still know that the sanctions that the US imposed can still be imposed as of now. The previous ceasefire that even I covered in the Analyst before, right? These are fragile. These are not ceasefire, these are just some blank political promises by the US, right? And also, the people who are affected by this 2025 and 2026 war, because this is not the recent conflict, because 1 year ago only the conflict started when Iran was actually struck by Israel, right? And also, the reconstruction funds is a very major political debate, because according to media reports, the reconstruction fund is at $300 billion. But the US administration is denying it, that we have not anywhere quoted any figure, not $300. So Iran is also kind of confused right now as to how much will be the fund, who will give that. US is telling that US will never give the fund using US taxpayers' money. US will try to include the Gulf and the Middle Eastern countries and have some payment arrangement within that only. So just imagine the hypocrisy of the US. And at the end, the US, what they are trying to understand in their own domestic political circles, they're telling that this nuclear deal is a promise only. According to the memorandum right now, the 60-day negotiation window, this reconstruction deal and various other things, these are only promises. Now, these are the opposition in the US which is telling that these are only promises, because the mistakes of the joint comprehensive plan which was agreed by the Obama administration is still there. Why? Because anything that is related to Iran so far which has been done by the US has only been executive orders. That means presidential orders. These are not passed by the Senate. When it is actually passed by the Senate, then it becomes a part of US national ambition, and everyone will try to follow that. But since it is a presidential order, so definitely the president who would enforce that would follow that. For example, when this joint comprehensive plan of action was formulated and conceptualized by Mr. Barack Obama, so back then it was kind of obligated on Iran that it would reduce its stockpile by 98%, cap enrichment, nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment at 3.67%, where if you want to have a nuclear weapon, 90% enrichment is required, reduce the centrifuges and various other things, which the then Mr. Barack Obama administration wanted to assure. And in return, what Iran was promised, that the sanctions will be lifted, that the US and the UN arm embargo would be lifted after 5 years, that Iran would have banking access to the global banking system, that Iran also will be given money for their investment and global trade. But it collapsed because, firstly, Iran was given various time periods of this nuclear enrichment, nuclear stockpile and everything. So the best possible scenario what Iran thought was to wait it out, because Iran knows that Israel, the neighbor, has a nuclear weapon. So if Israel has a nuclear weapon and if I do not have a nuclear weapon, then this is something imbalance that I'm staring into. So firstly, Iran also had some issues, guys. Iran waited it out, waited the JCPOA out. And that is why one of the reason it failed. Second reason it failed, because it is only one executive order. It is not passed by the Senate. And that is why majority of the executive orders are implemented by that president. And when the next president, such as Mr. Donald Trump, would come into power, what would happen? The plan would be cancelled. As simple as that. And Iran, since then, what they had done? Iran thought that, okay, since Mr. Donald Trump is there, and he told that no plan is there, then nothing here should be done. No obligation. Let us enrich uranium to 60%, then to 90%. And this is why this thing has happened as of now in real life. So basically, how this MOU is differing from the JCPOA? I don't see much differences, because there are many red flags which are marked in red, if you can see. For example, when we talk about the US domestic status, MOU is not a Senate approval, right? However much they told that, okay, nuclear is the new deal, Strait of Hormuz will be protected, regional stability will be there, but sunset clauses are not still decided. Inspection mechanism of the nuclear weapons in Iran to be decided. Israel position not included at all. Israel has not been included here. So this is where we are seeing, guys, that over a period of time, we have had various new Middle East frameworks. Just as the framework that we are discussing right now. This MOU, according to various experts, will be the new Middle East. But there have been various new Middle East in the past also. For example, Oslo peace process, US invasion of Iraq, Arab Spring, Abraham Accords. Every time these things happened, all of the political experts, they told that something new is happening, something new is coming, but nothing new came. Reality was totally different. But maybe right now experts are telling there is something genuinely different this time. Firstly, Iran's military right now is visibly destroyed. All of us can see that. They are weak. Also, the Middle Eastern countries are coming up with their vision documents such as 2030. They will transform Saudi Arabia, UAE diversification, because their fossil fuel economy is transitioning to a green economy. So they need economic resilience right now. US also is having a forever war fatigue. They withdrew from Afghanistan. They are actually trying to not continue this topic anymore. So in my opinion, the best case scenario, which won't be the reality, is that this MOU has been signed. This 60-day window negotiation has been done. Both of the parties, they are totally, trying to follow each and everything. Now, no one is a good boy nowadays, because this scenario 2 is the most likely that tension will be there. For example, the current scenario that is going on, fire, silence, ceasefire again fire. So these things will go on. But alongside MOU plus other ceasefire plus other some special instruments will be negotiated. And the worst case scenario, again, this will collapse again. The third war will go on. And the more war goes on, the countries such as India and everything, they are going to suffer at the end. So the lessons that we should all learn is that, for example, India is more than 90% dependent on this Middle East region for their LPG cylinders and the supply. But we do not have any strategic LPG reserves in India. So firstly, we should be having it, because only strategic petroleum reserves are not enough. We have to also diversify our import sources, Russia, Venezuela. This is all the things that we are trying to do right now. Lastly, India also learned something in diplomacy, that countries like Pakistan, they can mediate. Why we cannot? Why we did not negotiate or mediate for peace, right? So this is what will happen at the end of the day. Worst case scenario is that enrichment will still go on. Strait of Hormuz will not be open, right? Sanctions again will be imposed on Iran, and Israel can silently influence the veto power on any peace deals. So it is only up to the administration in the US and Iran to decide what would happen. In the comments, you can also let me what do you think will happen, right? And after that, practice this mains question. Next, we will move on to the value addition materials for your mains examination. Well, the first article here, according to a recent HelpAge India report, the name of the report is Climate Resilient Aging, Ensuring Care, Dignity and Agency, right? Why? Because the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was recently observed, and in this report, various startling things were found. Now, these are the things that you can quote in your mains answers, particularly in GS1 society, right? GS3 inclusive growth, where elderlies are actually one of the most vulnerable sections of the population. Even in GS2 answers related to social justice, you can quote the issues of elderly, which was also a question which was asked in the last 5 years of PYQs, right? So what happened is that in this report, it was found that 78% of the respondents, all the elderlies, experienced at least one climate-related hazard in the last 3 years. For example, heat waves, cyclones, flooding, droughts, avalanches, and various other aspects, right, were seen. Where heat wave, flood, and drought are the top 3 commonly reported incidents, which actually had a severe impact on their lives, right? Heat stress as a major concern has risen over a period of time. And also, remember this data, only one-liner important data are important here. So, more than half, that is 52%, said they were unable to afford even essential medicines. So, just remember these important points, because maybe in some answers you have to write about the issues of the elderly, so that you can actually give some concrete data. If not data, if you do not remember the data, no issues, at least quote this report and cite 1 or 2 cases that climate stress is increasing, half of the money is going for their medicines. So this was all for this one. Now the next one is regarding the state of Andhra Pradesh. who has recently partnered with Google to create AI Cloud Task Force. Now, why am I discussing this? Because in GS2, you have the concept of federalism, where the new dimensions of federalism is firstly cooperative federalism and competitive federalism. You know guys, as of now in 21st century India in 2026, all of the states are not at the mercy of the center. Some of the states, what they can do, they can go to various countries, such as here, our Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister has went to Singapore for securing various investments for the state's development. It's a very, very major thing, because Andhra Pradesh and Google will be setting a task force as to how AI, cloud infrastructure can improve the state administration at the local level, firstly. Secondly, we also have to increase various investments in data centers, AI centers, digital infrastructure, payment infrastructure, which is why we also want to attract various investments in the country itself. And for example, in Andhra Pradesh, for instance, so what it will do, it will lead to more regional growth. It will lead to Andhra Pradesh becoming the global, or say the India hub for innovation, which will make Andhra Pradesh a very, very competitive state. Because all of the states right now are in a competition to go ahead of each other, which is good for democracy. Because all these things, all these extra initiatives taken will only result in more investments in the near future, will create more jobs and more regional growth, so that most of the people do not need to come to Mumbai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Gurgaon and so on. So all of the employment opportunities will be there in the state itself. So this means that we need more regional growth, and such initiatives are good for that. Even he established some memorandum of understanding that okay, logistics park will be developed. UN Habitat meeting was scheduled, where a center of excellence will be envisaged in the state of Andhra Pradesh. So all of these things are very good initiative for the states. Now, again we have another report. Now this report will be very, very important if you want to write good answers in ethics, as to what is the role of persuasion and influence. For GS3, you have the topic of role of social media in internal security. So let us understand why. Social media, video platforms have actually surpassed traditional outlets as leading news resources, because right now the youth would prefer more news that they can see from Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and it has widely kind of surpassed the traditional mode of news reading, that is newspaper reading. And that is why maybe some of you do not read newspapers, right? So most of the news we are getting from social media. Why we are going to read newspapers? But no, at the end of the day, our reading skills and all of those things are important for us to understand. The way in which editorials are written, articles are written, are actually some of the ways in which you can write your own articles by getting some good vocabularies. So reading is a good practice for us. Watching reels, videos and some news videos is very easy to understand. But your brain is not working during that time. Your brain is just kind of getting information. And in this, what we are getting, we are getting information overload. Because our brain is not designed to see 10 news in 1 minute, which a reel can give you. You will forget things, right? And that is exactly what this report is trying to say. This is an online survey, where this survey is reporting that more people around the world are accessing news to third-party platforms. And this is actually seen more among the younger audiences. I guess some of my audience is also doing this, right? So it means that more of the younger generation in the future will not read newspapers, right? And 77% of the global, sample have consumed online news videos every week. So guys, let us be a wake-up call. Also, if you want to write good ethics answers, you can actually try to see how social media is influencing even our basic news reading habit, and also how we can write good essays by giving good arguments like this. If we want to go back to a age where we encourage more reading books than consuming videos like this, right? Good examples from the newspapers like this. Also, another article here, because the center recently has warned various ports and some of the marine establishments that there can be potential drone attacks, right? A very, very important development here, because according to official sources, the maritime security wing of the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways issued the alert recently related to vital assets that India has and vital installations that India has at the various ports there, right? And that is where the Thoothukudi port model becomes very, very important, because this port in India is very, very advanced, because first seaport it is to officially implement an advanced active anti-drone system. Very important for your GS3 Indian security. And here this has been a collaboration with the Central Electronics Limited, where the system architecture is where we are using radio frequency identifiers, radar-based system, and some jamming systems. Now, on to the final news article where we are talking about the mains enrichment. Here you can see there are some articles and some data which will be very, very important for firstly investments. If you see, this is the total trend of net FDI and net FPI. Right? FDI is a long-term investment and FPI is a short-term investment where we are investing in equity, bonds and etc. So you see, this is the trend as of now. Obviously, the trend is going down to the Middle East crisis, investors are running away and various other reasons. So such data you can quote in your mains answers. On the other hand, marginal increase in unemployment rate in May, if you can see here, because as of now, the unemployment rate in the country is 5.5% in May as compared to April. This is according to the recent periodic labor force survey, which is released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So this means that in India, employment has decreased, unemployment rate has marginally increased, mainly due to the various issues that we are facing on the international level also, right? And this was everything that was important. Also, India's good exports hit record highs of $45.2 billion in May. But at the end of the day, the trade deficit has also increased. You know, it is a good thing that our merchandise exports are on the rise on a month-to-month basis, if you can see, and sometimes before the mains examination scene, this amount of data is very, very important. And also, if you can see, the export actually has risen because exports to Singapore, China, UK, Tanzania, Bangladesh, Germany, South Africa, right, they have actually risen, correct? But at the end of the day, the deficit in trade is still there. It is still there, which you can actually quote in your mains answers. So I guess this was all for the mains part. Now finally we will conclude the prelims pointers. Where the first article is again a report. It seems that today there are so many reports, right? Now this first report is very important here because we are going to understand how more heat waves are increasing secondary pollution in the country. Now, primary pollutants are, for example, oxides of carbon, nitrous oxides, right? So these are directly emitted by vehicles, these are directly emitted by industries, and they directly try to harm us, right, by entering our bloodstream, etc, etc. So primary pollutants are dangerous, but you know guys, what happens? Primary pollutants plus nature, you know, they give rise to secondary pollutants like ozone. Now how this happens? This happens by a simple thing, that is solar UV radiation plus various volatile organic carbon. Now this means that there are, for example, various VOCs always in our environment because there is always a new building which is being painted. And VOCs are mainly arising from such industries such as household paint industry or various aerosol industry and so on. So there we have a lot of VOCs, right? It is like that smell, you can understand, na? That paint wala smell. So this is where it combines with our solar energy. Also, if there is some nitrous oxide present nearby, which is abundantly available because of the huge pollution wealth that India has. We have no shortage of sulfur oxides, we have no shortage of our PM 2.5, PM 10 pollutant matter or nitrous pollutants. So we have a wealth of all of the pollution in the world. So definitely this is why ozone is created. But you know guys, what happens? Ozone, if it is in the stratosphere, it is good. It actually protects us from the UV rays, right? But when we have more ozone below 10 kilometer or tropospheric ozone, that is not good for us, because this kind of ozone, they can enter our bloodstream, they cause nausea, they cause, most importantly, pulmonary diseases, right? Now before we go on to that, firstly understand that the stratospheric ozone is formed in a different way. It is formed when oxygen molecules are actually reacted by the UV light, and then they form oxygen molecule. Then an ozone molecule is nothing but 3 oxygen atoms. Now this is where we understand also the fact that this national study, which was done in the Nature portfolio by the name of NPJ Clean Air, this is telling that the ozone concentration according to the WHO safety guideline must be 70 micrograms per cubic meter. How much is in India? During heat waves, 85 to 110 micrograms, because heat waves actually result in a more drier condition. And this is exactly how those primary pollutants such as mainly oxides of nitrogen combine with VOC, and if it is a dry weather in North India, definitely more VOC will be lying here and there. Plus, if you can actually combine the temperature, high temperature, extreme temperature, so this will result in more ozone pollution at the ground level, at the local level. The El Nino has made it even more impactful, right? So even much more kind of we are seeing the ground level ozone, which is leading to various diseases based on the cardiovascular diseases, right? Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. It has led to more and more excess amount of deaths in the country. So this actually is posing a huge challenge also along the western Himalayan region, where these kind of ozone concentration is increasing at the ground level, right? And this is kind of posing a challenge for us, because at the local level, ozone cannot be measured properly. So a statistical challenge is also there. So this is what India has to combat it as of now during the summer months, because the heat wave action plans according to various state governments, they must also try to consider measuring the ozone concentration and trying to get rid of it. So I think this was all for this one. We'll now move on to the next one. Now since UPSC is asking more global relevant news in prelims itself, so let us actually understand what is the social media ban that took place in UK. So what happened recently? This is not one country which is taking a decision. In the past few months, we have seen how France, Australia most importantly, Greece, Malaysia, Austria, Indonesia, New Zealand, Italy, France either have some child safety regulation for social media ban or are in the process of banning social media for teenagers. Mainly they are targeting youth between the ages of 14 to 15 to 16 years. In the case of UK, it is 16 years, where the social media platforms such as Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, around 10 platforms should be taking reasonable steps to find child profiles, teenage profiles and deactivate them. Prevent opening of new accounts and having comprehensive safety guidelines for anyone who wants to open an account, or maybe who is a child who is opening an account. And also the platforms, these companies, these 10 companies should be figuring out what can be the other ways by which these children can access social media if a ban is there, to totally prevent no kind of children to access social media. Now this is a very, very controversial decision, right? Now who is exempt from here? Educational sites such as maybe YouTube, e-commerce, music streaming, messaging websites such as WhatsApp and Signal, these are not impacted, right? These are essential. But this UK's new war on big technology is something worth consideration, because this ban will be having age gating, selfie estimation will be done, ID checks will be done, right? And it will be enforced by spring 2027. Now, why the government is acting right now, and in fact why the various governments around the world is acting right now? Firstly, because the social media platforms, all of us know, have some design features which make it very attractive, such as like, comment, subscribe and all those things. Now these things, what they do? They influence children. They make them trapped within the algorithm, right? They give too much dopamine to them that they get addicted and they cannot get outside. Because according to the recent reports, if you can see, social media is something which has crept up into the minds of the children in the UK. Smartphone addiction in the UK is due to mainly watching TV. Even while walking, they are using that. Going to bed before sleeping. Some of us can also relate, right? So this means that this is not a matter of say laughter or comedy or something like that. This is a very serious concern, because when these children will be becoming adults, they will be suffering from anxiety, stress, depression, loneliness, mood swings. Now guys, all of your life problems, if you are seeing right now, can be solved at least by 10%, right? If you reduce your social media consumption. Just listen to me as your friend, as someone who wants your good, as someone who wants you to become an officer within the next year or maximum within the next 2 years. So please refrain voluntarily from social media, right? Because you do not need social media to be social. You have your friends, you have your families, you talk to them, you interact with them only for 1 to 2 years. And next, after that, you have the social media rules of the say UPSC and even the DOPT, and even at Labasna you have social media rules also. So from now on, let us change, because we are all aspiring to become leaders, because our mental health is important, our safety is important, because the youth, they become radicalized on social media, they become more steered towards violence, because we love watching this Ghar Ka Kalesh and all those kind of channels, because these kind of things, have a deep algorithm based bias which change our psychology, how we think, how we behave gradually, even without us realizing what we are doing. Now obviously the big technology companies such as YouTube, Meta, Snapchat all do not agree. They tell that okay, if we totally ban the social media for below 16 years of age, these children, they will go to more dark apps. They will download outside the Play Store. Sometimes pornographic elements will be there. Cyberbullying can happen there without any government regulation, right? Also, Twitter, who is owned by Mr. Trillionaire, is telling that okay, this is a human rights violation. It is violating freedom of speech. Okay, we can agree that okay, we have some freedom of expression, human rights, or right to speech for young people. Maybe this ban is inefficient, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that such measures are required. Drastic measures are required, especially when these many adults are facing this kind of issues. Addiction is there, economy is not able to perform properly, and that is why, for example, in Australia, if someone is opening a social media account, they have to do all these kind of things. They have to do all these kind of things, and this is maybe the need of the hour. But maybe they can have their own problems and risks. For example, at the technical side, how well these 10 platforms actually ban the apps is a kind of a matter of debate. Whether the children are using VPN or not to bypass the security. Because for example, if a child in UK is using VPN to show that that child is in India, so that child can easily access social media there. They can access TikTok, Facebook, not TikTok here, but any other kind of social media websites. When it comes to legal and right issues, the freedom of expression thing is a valid thing, because sometimes, there are various stories of children who came up onto social media to report against sexual harassment within their family members. right? Or within, or for mobilizing various issues on the environmental aspect, such as Greta Thunberg, if you can remember. But while she has changed her stance and everything nowadays, it seems like, but at the end of the day, this is one genuine thing. Also, one more thing is regarding data. Now, if all these under 16 teenagers have to submit their face ID, government ID, to prove they are children or not, so at the end of the day, these companies are collecting data, personal sensitive data. Using AI, they will process this data. So you can fill in the blank what will happen, right? Also, the law already has some guarantees in UK. For example, UK's Online Safety Act already requires major tech companies to prevent under 18s from accessing harmful content. So maybe, we had some other ways to also do that, because sometimes such legislations can go to court, such as when Australia banned social media for the same reasons for the teenagers, for under 16s. They went to the court, right? And for example, when we look into the social factor, right, the children can move out to the more darker apps where they are less safe. Inequality can increase because the voice of online students will go down, and even marginalized communities can suffer. So these are some minor chances, but that is why we have to take a balanced approach here. Some practical approaches can be there, some phase-wise implementation can be there, and India should also be taking heed of this matter. So this was all for this one. Let us move on to the next, where we discuss the recent 2025 UNHCR Global Trends Report. So if the prelims exam is asking that the Global Trends Report is published by which organization, it is the UNHCR, which is the High Commissioner for Refugees. So this will be a report, obviously, where we look into the refugee status of the world. Total refugees 4.16 crore, a decline according to the last year. Palestinian refugees have been 15% of the total refugees, but at the end of the day, it will be the Rohingyas which will be the highest numbers. Now, homecoming has increased to around 1.47 crore, where the refugees are returning back to their home, but this is not a good thing. We will gradually understand why. Top asylum destination has been the US, and origin of asylum has been Ukraine, obviously due to the Russian-Ukraine crisis. Because if you can see the chart here, the chart of Ukraine, which is this blue line here, has suddenly increased after 2021. Also, countries like Sudan is seeing increases, right? Venezuela, in recent time, it has seen increases. On the other side, you have seen Syria has seen less number of refugees, declining number of refugees. Afghanistan is seeing declining number of refugees, right? South Sudan, same or stagnant number of refugees. Sudan, increasing number of refugees. Why am I individually telling this? Because they can ask you in the exam. As simple as that. Right now, the nature of the questions in prelims is very unpredictable. So let us go beyond the data. Also, refugees, people in a refugee-like situation, and other people in need of international protection by country of asylum. This is where we understand that Chad is on an increasing trend. Uganda, increasing trend. Germany, stable or declining. We have also seen Iran, which increased simultaneously, and it has been decreasing. Turkey, decreasing. Pakistan is also on the chart, where Pakistan in recent times has been in a decreasing phase, right? Now, if you see the number of countries, number of people actually registering for new asylum system, is where US is topping the list, followed by Egypt, Germany, Chad, Spain, Poland, etc. Right? And where are all these people coming from? Ukraine. Where are the people from Ukraine mainly taking asylum? In Germany. If you can see, Germany is one of them. Then you have even Poland and Spain. Then you have various other countries. Right? So this is how you should be analyzing the data. So the main story behind the number is that people who are returning back actually, who are actually finding some solutions, so-called solutions, but there is no solution. The solution is that the asylum countries such as US, Germany, UK, even in recent times so many European countries, they are intentionally sending back people back to their countries where they actually ran from. For example, Afghanistan case study. Many people to escape from Taliban, they entered Pakistan and Iran. But in recent times, these countries are pushing back those Afghani citizens into, or say Afghani refugees, into Afghanistan itself, right? Also, Venezuela, South Sudan and Ukraine are the worst hit countries in this aspect here. So I guess it was all for this one. We can now move on to the last article, where India, and a very unlikely country which we have not heard too much when we talk about Indian relations with that country, it is Slovakia, where we are not only expanding ties, but we have extended our relationship with a memorandum of understanding to a comprehensive partnership. Just imagine this. This is where Slovakia is located. It is sandwiched between Poland and Hungary, the north and south side. On the eastern side, it is having Ukraine. And on the western side, we have Czech Republic and Austria. Can in the comment section anyone tell me how many of them are playing World Cup as of now? That was a different question, but right now, when we talk about Slovakia, we have to understand Slovakia is not a random choice by us. It is actually a powerhouse when we talk about Central Europe and how we have various sectors such as EV and also some sectors related to electronics and artificial intelligence. So, it is important for us to know some mapping aspects. For example, when we talk about Slovakia, we have a river which is coming from Czech Republic, which is not entering the country, but it is having the boundaries of the country. So you see that there are two rivers like that. The Morava river and the Danube river, which kind of flows along the boundary, and it is also a national boundary. We have the rivers such as Rhone, Va, right, which is within the country itself, right? We also have the Hornad river, which is entering the country. Also on the other hand, we have the Carpathian mountains, which is spreading throughout the northern sides. We also have the Tatra mountains and the Ore mountains, right? So this is where we have this country in geography. Now in numbers, we have a population of 5.5 million there, area roughly approximately 50,000 square kilometer, and it is a part of the Visegrad group, right? And it is where even EU is present. So based on their import and export, India can actually become a part of the same. Right. Now, it is not having a very high GDP, only 0.7% of the total EU group, but the demand for Indian goods and services can be high. India can also attract the best practices in renewable sector, in automation, in EV, in municipal waste recycling practices, and so on. And that is why we have a comprehensive partnership. Firstly, we have to understand that diplomatic status have been improved dramatically right now. Now, we will be doing collaboration in labor migration, defense, digital technology, research, health, audiovisual creation. This is where maybe the orange economy will be promoted, right? We also would be trying to have an early implementation of the India-EU Free Trade Agreement. Also, India's dominance in AI and digitization also will be shared, correct? And this will also help us have a technology transfer with that country. Correct? So, joint defense production. Besides, IIT Delhi and Slovak Technical University will be having student exchange programs, scholarships, research collaboration, tourism cooperation, scientific coordination, right? And at the end of the day, quantum communication, critical infrastructure protection, everything will be taken care of. So, this was all guys for today. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck, but do not forget to attend the quiz.